Welcome back to this session. And today I am joined by Daniel Wallace, a Brit living in the USA. Daniel, welcome, a great friend of mine.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks, Brian.
It's absolutely great to have you. Now, Daniel is actually the host of 3 annual summits. I don't know how he pulls that off because I'm already struggling with one. And he has over 10,000 writers subscribed to his newsletter, which we're going to talk about in just a bit. He actually is the creator of the character first writing approach that has helped hundreds of authors make progress on their books and also receive 5-star reviews from readers. He lives with a perhaps excessive number of pets and is getting more serious about gardening, and we might have to ask him about that as well. But of course, today we are going to talk about marketing, and you teach craft. So why are we talking about marketing? Because you essentially, correct me if I'm wrong, transitioned slowly into being, from only being a writer into being a teacher, into having courses, into running summits for authors. So I think the business side of things is always a problem for writers. How did you personally navigate this transition from just writing to monetizing, to actually being able to monetize your skills?
That's a great question, Brian. And it was obviously a long story. I had to deal with a lot of imposter syndrome when I was getting started. I felt enormous pressure, like what would anyone listen to me? Would anybody want to pay me anything? Who was I to teach people? And I've been in the early years, I was always haunted by that masterclass with Neil Gaiman that I would constantly see on Facebook advertised to me, and the video quality was really fantastic. It only cost, I think, $90 at the time, and I'm such a huge fan of Neil Gaiman, always have been. So I really thought to myself, like, how do I do this? What am I doing? And I also had a lot of conceptual, intellectual, how practical questions. I had run a blog about the craft of writing for years, but I had never really made any money. I had tried tip jars, I had tried a Patreon, and none of that had ever been successful in the slightest. And so there was both a kind of challenge of just sort of being brave enough to do it, and then like how to make it actually work. And I studied a lot of things we could talk about in this interview, but that's sort of where I was at the beginning.
Yeah, when I saw those, I remember attending the James Patterson masterclass, which I think was the first one about writing. And I thought, how on earth these people get James Patterson on there? And the production quality was like unlike anything I'd ever seen. So it's that was great inspiration. So yeah, you talked about imposter syndrome, about maybe also finding a topic. That was that one of the challenges, finding the good topic to start with?
Well, I would say that, I would take like a step back. And what I did at the very beginning was based on looking at a series of listening to podcasts. I listened to a lot of podcasts in the early days, including ones that my wife recommended to me that had nothing to do with writing. I listened to a lot of Food Blogger Pro. I got to give a shout out to them, where they covered like the kind of marketing training that digital marketers know, and that if you don't know any of those things, I'm sure you've covered this a lot in the summit, but things like a lead magnet, a landing page, a funnel, they just covered so many of those essentials that without knowing that stuff, it can just be very difficult to make kind of meaningful progress. And what I did was I created a newsletter at first, a newsletter that I was writing about every week, and I would share craft ideas with people. And the newsletter was pretty general. It did not have a kind of niche. It did not have a plan or a project yet. And I basically was just asking people, I would ask you what they were interested in. I would see what things people responded to. And I quickly saw that the topic that everyone was really interested in was plotting. I could see that that was the thing that people were most focused on, how to plot a novel. And that just suggested very clearly what my first paid course should be.
Yeah, I was one of the first customers, I remember. And actually,
So grateful. Thank you.
because I don't know if you remember, but it was shared by Thrive Teams, which is like a website builder,
Oh,
and
yeah, yeah.
one of their like on their newsletters they showcase the best websites, and I saw that and I thought, oh my god, that's exactly what I would like. So that's how I found it. But one of
Wow.
the things I struggle with when I come up with an idea for a course or even a summit is that there's so many out there, and I always get the idea of, as soon as I Google something, I'm always hoping it's nothing's done, nobody's done it yet, but there's always something there. So what did you do, or was this even a problem, or did you have any strategies to kind of stand out and appeal to writers more than the other courses, maybe?
I want to try to give a really honest answer here because um, I I I think that I came to my sort of differentiating qualities both in my events and in my courses quite late. Like I think that the figuring out what was unique about them came after selling them for some time. Uh, and I honestly think that the reason why people bought my course in the very beginning is that they liked me. They had been reading my newsletter. Some of them had been reading my blog and following my blog for some time. But they found me somehow either through Thrive Themes or I did a lot of work on Pinterest in the early days. And I think they liked the way I talked about storytelling. Like they thought it sounded compelling. It sounded interesting. I was talking and teaching a lot of things. I mean, I was teaching for free, but until the course launch, I had nothing to sell. And I think that's what people really liked. And then later, listening to people, seeing what people responded to in the summits, I would see like when did people seem to get really excited, and then sort of that's what I think made the things really unique. But at the beginning, I don't think it was a unique selling proposition at all. Or at least I was not marketing it that way. I think a lot of my ideas were there in sort of unconscious, nebulous form that I could teach, on the spot, but I couldn't do a very good job advertising. That the sort of ability to market it came later.
I think one of the things that struck me was a lot of things in place at the right time. I think like the design was very nice, and also the way you presented the slides it was very different from traditional kind of courses, and so I think that played a part in it. But do you remember what your sort of thought process was when creating the course, like from when you had the idea and then to filming and then launching? Do you remember some of this process, and can you talk about it?
Uh, I My thoughts on this have changed a lot over time, and the very first course I created and the very first time I sold it, I was so nervous about asking people for money that I could not, I physically could not bring myself to record a single video before I sold the course. There was like a enormous block in my mind to have anything ready. And I realized that was not very clever. Like I should have obviously been recording videos to have something ready to show people. But um, I was so convinced that nobody would buy that I made nothing at all. But what I did do that was very that worked well, and I'm very grateful, is that I tried to study advice that people had about how to sell a course. And in particular, I followed Jeff Walker's book Launch, and um, and I read that book and listened to an audiobook multiple times. And I looked a lot at blog posts, free blog posts that Brian Harris over at what was then Video Fruit and now is Growth Tools had released. And I basically did what they said to do. And I think that makes it, I want to be clear to people who are interested in trying this out, that there are lots of frameworks out there for doing this kind of thing, for creating some kind of course. And it's really a good idea to just follow the framework as closely as you can. And that may make things sound formulaic, but I don't think it was for me, and it doesn't have to be for you, because part of what these people are saying is like, listen to what people are telling you. Like, have conversations with the people in your audience. Don't kind of go away and kind of create what you hope will be the perfect paid product, course, training thing, class, but rather be asking people, what is bothering you? What is keeping you up at night? What what is embarrassing to to mention to your friends? When your friends who know you're a writer talk to you, what are you embarrassed to bring up with them? And then what would your life be like if you could wave a magic wand and that problem will go away? What would be your ideal day if you could no longer face that problem? And that portion of the launch, doing that kind of work, was really essential, because then you're like, okay, I'm talking to this group of people. Not everyone would buy the course, but I'm talking to them, and I understand very deeply like what it is I'm trying to do in this course when I make it, and that was kind of critical.
Yeah, definitely. I think back then the resources weren't that many, even though courses started quite a while ago, quite a while back in terms of online courses. Now there's so much stuff. I think we've got the opposite problems. So many things out there and so many courses. But I remember back then, I think it was all the same. We were all following the same people because they were kind of pioneers back then. So cool. So you said that actually the community came before the course and the courses and the summit. So why did you have an interest in the community, and how did you go about building it? And also, did this have a role in then promoting your courses and the other things you had to offer?
Yeah, that's a great question. I want to distinguish between two things. The I think that building a community through some method is really critical to getting into this kind of space, this kind of business, being an online teacher, where you're gathering people to your kind of your newsletter, your banner, your whatever it is, your site, who see things the way you do, who are interested in the things you're interested in. For instance, from the very beginning, I was really interested in talking about fiction that tried to merge this divide between literary and genre fiction, that was interested in the kind of things that genre, what people call genre fiction, is interested in, and also the things that the stuff that people call literary fiction was interested in too. And trying to make that really clear, like, this is the kind of thing I'm trying to do. This is the kind of thing I'm interested in. I'm interested in maybe a particular speed of writing. I'm interested in like solving a certain kind of writing problem for a certain kind of person. I think that's really critical. And finding out ways to start conversations with people is like, I think, a really important skill. Like that writing email newsletters, creating blog posts, creating free downloads that encourage you to write back. to get back in touch and say, I'm interested in this, I'm interested in that, I like this part, wasn't too sure about that, is really valuable. For instance, I had this idea like, well, wouldn't I do something like the writer's persona? Very early on, I had this idea. I could make a course of like, what does it mean to have a sort of writing persona? I don't even know what I would have taught, but I had this idea that it would be interesting. And I quickly could see that no one was, my particular audience was not interested in that particular course. I could just see the results. And I think that's really important. Now, I do want to say that another meaning of the word community is something different, which is you've got like a Facebook group, a forum, and I will just be clear, and I feel embarrassed about this, but I have tried over the years to make one of a thriving community like that, and I have never succeeded. I am very bad at that. I do not seem to do well with spaces where I'm interacting with people on like an hourly basis. I've even done like personality tests, and they all say like, you're the kind of person who needs to say something brilliant and then vanish. And so I've tried over time to build a community of that kind, and I've totally failed. And I'm now really honest with people who come to my events. Like, we will have this event for 4 days, and there will not be a thing that is like ongoing until the next event. And everyone kind of looks at me a bit in a puzzled way, but the people who keep coming back have got used to it, and I'm much happier now, not trying to create that kind of like community. If that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. Because also, especially with summits, maybe you get a lot of people joining all at once. And then you're essentially faced with you're obviously happy, but you're faced with the problem of deciding what to say, how to keep the community engaged. And oh my God, nobody's written anything for 2 days, 3 days. And so it's definitely not easy. It's something very nice to have when it goes well, I think, but not necessarily easy to build. So that brings me to the summits, which I am very glad to talk about. So give us a brief overview of your summit host career from zero to now.
Oh, great. So I came to Summit hosting because I had a big problem in my online business. And I really think that people who are interested in doing this, particularly writers who maybe are already busy writing their books, like, you should be aware of this, which is I was very lucky that when I launched my first course, people bought the course. That's amazing and wonderful. And so I then, a few months later, launched another course, and people bought that, and I was feeling great. But over time, what I discovered is that I was now writing emails every week or every so often to my mailing list of people who had not bought. And I was also had another job that was also very demanding, which is delivering courses to people who were buying. And as a result, I had no free time. I was working flat out, and I no longer had time to do any kind of real like marketing to get traffic, to get new people into my audience. Now, I had my website, I had referrals, I had people who discovered me through Thrive Themes and other places, but that was small scale. It was just enough to kind of keep my email list level. Like, people would unsubscribe, and then people would find me one way or another, through Instagram, through referrals, all kinds of things. But it was not growing my business at all. And so there was a period where I was becoming a much better online teacher. I was figuring out all the things I told you before. Like, I didn't know how to explain what I wanted to teach. I didn't know how to describe it. I was working with my students. I was doing coaching, and I was listening to them describe back to me what I was teaching. I was like, actually, I do have a unique take on things. I do have a way of thinking about plot that is different to what a lot of people are doing. And I can really help people, but I didn't have time to, I didn't, or skills or budgets to market. And so I had this sort of vague idea of hosting a summit. I heard about summits. I thought they were really good. And then I And I even bought the AppSumo deal for a Summit platform, Hey Summit, that I really recommend. That's really fantastic. But I never used it because I was too nervous. I had another bout of imposter syndrome, where I got nervous afresh. Who am I to reach out to other teachers, other writers? Who will want to say yes to speak? This event seems really big. Will I be, will people be mad at me somehow? And I had this pivotal moment where I went to a webinar again by Brian Harris, who I owe so much to, even though I've never really paid him very much money. And he said, here's a growth strategy for people who don't want to buy ads. He said, and this is like the Brian Harris method that you should go and subscribe to him and buy his stuff so you can learn it properly. But he had this idea of like, once a week, arrange an affiliate webinar with people in your space where you go and present something, whether it's free, whether it's paid. That, you do basically do webinar swaps where you show up on to their audience and promote something to their audience every week. And maybe, it's they reciprocate, or if you sell something to their audience, you share their commissions. And he was like, do that for like 20 weeks. And I thought, he's right. That would work. I've done webinars like that before. They have been really successful. He's right. But then I thought, you know what? I'm not going to take 20 weeks to do that. I'm going to do everything he described in 4 days. Because what I wanted to do was create a summit that would achieve that same result in a long weekend. And from then, it was a question of like trying to figure out what to do. You, of course, were invaluable talking to me about how to actually host a summit. I'm so grateful to you. Your advice really has changed my life in ways that I can never repay.
Thanks. Make me blush.
I'm so grateful for your expertise. You were such a generous and great teacher. And again, I tried to do, when it was time to host summits, I tried to do just the most, follow the formula, like the thing that people said worked. I just tried to do that exactly. I planned out my first summit and began sending out speaker cold emails, and people said yes, and the event was really great.
Yeah, I remember doing my first one.
Should I go on to the stage 2, or
yeah, sure,
that was
definitely.
stage 1.
And then what happened after that? You got hooked, because usually when you do one summit, you get hooked. That's what happened to me.
Yeah, the first summit went really well. People were asking, when's the next one? And I just thought, and I said like, well, I might do it again next year. And people said, we don't want to wait. Like, we don't want to wait a whole year. And so what I began doing is a strategy that, again, is like, in some ways, the simplest possible strategy, which is, I thought of a different topic, a writing topic that I could do in the spring, and that went well. And then I thought of a topic I could do in the summer, and that also went well. The topic for the spring was writing style. That was something that I've always been interested in. People followed me a long time ago. People found my essays on style really interesting. And then I thought author marketing for early stage writers seemed to fit my audience really well. And so that was my summer summit. And then I just started repeating them every year, the exact same thing. So every October, I do Escape the Plot Forest. It is the same format. I have small variations. I try out little things, through the event, different bonuses, different pre-events, different networking, maybe one networking session. But the basic thing is doing the exact same thing over and over again. And when I was new at marketing and online teaching, I was so terrified of boring people. I thought, I need to entertain my list. I need to come up with new stuff all the time. What I found is that's just a misunderstanding. That people love coming back to the same event every year. Yep. That people are excited for it, and they relish the idea that it's going to be what they enjoyed last year, and often the same speakers. Not teaching the same stuff, like not just repeating the videos, but they know what they're getting, and people seem to really love that.
Yeah, it was one of
And
my
I've been doing that,
struggles.
just to be clear.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, go on. And I've been doing that for the last 3 years. So I'm now coming
Yeah.
on to the 10th summit, the fourth plot summit, and it's going strong.
Yeah, and it was something that I always struggled with. Well, I always still struggle with is every year I try to come up with new topics and I think, oh, this year I'm going to do a blah 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 summit, and every year I go back to Fiction Marketing Academy also because it's apart from being what goes well, then just repeat what goes well, but also because it's a format now, and I'm sure yours are the same, that like you said, people look forward to, and they know it's going to happen in this specific month, and they know what they can expect and things like that. So that's, I think, establishing a routine of content is really valuable, I think.
Yes, I think that there's a couple of things involved there. One is the teacher's fallacy, where you as a teacher become so familiar with your own material that you think that once someone's seen it once, they're now bored, burned out. They don't want to see it again. They want something new. But from the audience's perspective, it's been a whole year since that last summer, and they're busy. They've got all kinds of things going on. They're probably going to other events too. They're subscribed to a whole bunch of other online writing teachers. They've maybe bought someone's course and maybe they loved it, maybe they hated it. Uh, they had a child, they got a new job, they moved house, and they're not sitting there thinking, "Oh, like the same thing again." They're thinking, "Oh yeah, that thing that happened a year ago. I remember it was really fun. I don't honestly remember half the sessions. Um, maybe I only remember a couple, but man, I had a good time." And I'm the same way. Like I don't sit there, looking at even the online teachers and marketers and leaders that I really admire. I'm not sitting there thinking, oh, Simone did that same thing a year ago. Oh, she's running out of material. I think, here it comes again. Great. I mean, if she were going to teach the exact same course, the exact same workshop or class, I might think, you
Mm.
know, that's funny. But to know that sort of thing is available, it's coming back. I remember that I liked it. I think that we need to be very clear that um, our audience is not seeing our material the way we are, where we feel like, if you host a summit, you're often like discussing each session with the speaker beforehand. You're figuring out questions to ask, then you record it, and then you watch it live when the summit airs. So you've seen it in effectively like 2.5 times. That's not the average person's experience. And so that's really important. And the other thing I wanted to bring up before we move on, which is something that I think I had to really struggle with, is if you are an artistic kind of person, there is an aspect to marketing and sales that you may find very challenging, and I found very challenging, which is you have to repeat yourself. Sales and market, like if you get into this kind of business, this kind of game of like, I've got something, digital products, digital courses, events to sell, you you have to accept the reality that the way you promote them to people, and I mean that both when it's time to sell them and also just talking about them, is you have to talk a lot about these things over and over again, uh, in a way that many autistic people are not used to. I sometimes see my friends on Facebook saying, "I'm talking about my next event twice. I hope that's okay. Please don't unfollow me." And I just laugh and I think twice is not even enough.
Twice a
I've never
day.
even heard I wasn't on. Yeah, yeah, twice a day is probably not enough. Like um, the idea that we're all on Facebook taking notes on everything we see, and we're like cross-referencing the tweets that our friends make. We are not. And it's the other benefit of repeating the event and not changing it is it really helps you realize, like, if I want people to pay attention to this, I have to talk about it a lot. And that's just how this works.
Yeah, definitely. I think um, it's something. I think what that might, if it were to come down to one thing, that's the biggest struggle for writers is that it's such a leap between what you're used to as a writer, um, and what you have to do as a marketer, as a person who has to sell their things. And also, it's not even comparable with books, because books, I think, once you've written them and they're out there for sale, you of course have to market them, but it's a bit of a detached kind of marketing. Don't know if you see what I mean. But with something that you have made, like a course or a summit, you have to be very involved into the marketing. So that might also be why a lot of people struggle. So I wanted to ask you, if you had to give some advice for people, writers specifically out there, who would like to diversify their income streams, because let's remember that there are things that you can teach and that you can do to have maybe a little extra income stream that you can then reinvest in your actual writing business. So what would you say to them? What opportunities do you see coming? What's your opinion?
I think that writers should definitely be interested in trying to diversify into some kind of education-based digital product. And I would encourage people to be very open and flexible about what form that takes. I think that there's you can sometimes think, I've got to teach a workshop, because I took workshops as a graduate student or as a university student. So I've got to be reading everyone's work, and we got to meet on Zoom, and that might work for you, but it might not. You might see everyone in the online space is making these online courses full of videos. I should make something just like that, with 20 videos to watch. But it's really worth sort of being very flexible, I think, about how you're delivering this educational thing, and seeing what works for you, what makes you feel happy, what makes you feel enlivened and excited, and also what your audience seems to respond to. It's just really worth trying things, like try a one-day class, an hour class. I see people doing all kinds of interesting things these days, like get access to me for a weekend over voicemail. So you can leave me voicemails and I'll respond,
Nice.
soonish. Try all kinds of things that fit your personality type, what energizes you, and avoid things that make you feel depressed and exhausted. And I'd also say that you absolutely do not need to make something that is about the craft of writing. You can. That's what I did. But I think that one hang up a lot of writers have is they think, oh, I just don't want to talk about craft. I don't, it's just not my thing. That's totally okay. And you should absolutely not get into the craft of writing if you don't want to. And in fact, it might be better for your writing career not to do that, because your readers of your books might well not be writers themselves. Like if you're a working writer, you've got books out, maybe there's something that your audience would be more interested in. Like, you write Scottish romance novels, historical Scottish romance novels. Maybe there's something you could teach people about Scotland that they would be interested in buying, or coming to a paid live class about. There's nothing to do with the craft of writing. Maybe there's something about Scotland. Maybe there's something about, I don't know, something about your book. Maybe you could do a cooking class that's connected to the recipes in your book. I'm not sure what it is, but I think that trying to figure that could be really valuable. And I'll give one additional reason why I think it's worth doing, is that sometimes I see writers, particularly some traditionally published writers, where they've kind of gotten into this, from my mind, a kind of slightly negative cycle where they are trying to get the next book out to publish, and other opportunities that come up, like talking at an event, doing some kind of class, feel like distractions from that work, because the way they get paid is to get the next book out. And that's wonderful. But what it means is when someone asks you to come and do a thing, you kind of don't have anything to sell, especially if you're traditionally published, because you can sell your books, obviously, but the royalties are relatively small from that. You're unlikely going to pay for your supper, um, selling books for those events. Whereas if you have some kind of product on the back end and you have some kind of way for people to subscribe to you, learn about you, sort of get to know you, and you have something to sell to the people who are most engaged with your work, it just, I think, transforms your experience of those kind of opportunities. It gives you this feeling of like, yeah, I could get in front of people and start sharing all the things I have to offer. I think that is a healthy way of looking at an artistic life.
Yeah, I think that's it's always, the first step is always the hardest one. Even when I was reaching out to my first hopefully wannabe guests of my first summit, I was absolutely nobody, and I remember, I was very, very scared. And I can tell you, my first ever interview, I started preparing like hours before and like checking the internet and doing all kinds of things continuously to
Of
make it.
course,
But
of course.
it's obviously when you do something and you start and you get feedback from what you've done, you can also correct the course as well, literally correct the course as well, and then move on. What about um, if somebody out there would like to host maybe a small summit, or what would be your 2 cents advice?
Well, it's a great topic. I think that the thing that makes to me the thing that makes a summit, and this is really basic, is that the effort of promoting and sharing the summit is shared by the host and the speakers. So you could do like a paid workshop, and you could say, pay me $100, $300, whatever amount of money to for me to teach a class. In that situation, you're generally going to be promoting it yourself, particularly when you're early in the sort of life, early in this process. And that means that you are kind of trying to find your super fans, the people who really like what you're doing, the people who are engaging with your email newsletter or Instagram page, because they're the ones most likely to buy. A summit is different. A summit, you are asking the speakers and maybe some sponsors, but mostly the speakers to share with their own audience. And so, if you take that as the idea of like what a summit is and how it's different to a paid class or a workshop or something else, or a famous conference where the name of the conference is what draws people in, then what you've got to do is basically try to find what you might think of your competitors in the space, people who are doing something very similar to you. If you're trying to do craft of writing, then finding people who are also teaching the craft of writing. If you are writing a book about childhood and you think, okay, I think people might want parenting tips, I don't know, from reading because they read my book. There's loads of people out there teaching parenting tips. And part of what makes a summit successful is you find those people and you say, I'm hosting this event. And what I do is I will say to the people, if someone decides to buy a ticket for this event, what I do is I will split the commissions 50-50 with them. And that I like that philosophically because it's saying we're literally sharing the rewards of this event. And so what I would encourage someone to do is, the nice thing, well, what makes Summit so wonderful in some ways is that it encourages you to look at the people in your space, your industry, your niche, not as competitors. They have their own audience. They've appealed to people slightly different to you, people who you would not attract for whatever reason. You're too wishy-washy for those people, or you're too hard-nosed for those people, or you email too much for those people, or you email too infrequently for those people. Your competitors have gathered those people and earned their interest. And so together you make some kind of really interesting event. And that's what I was just trying, start small if you want. Try and find like 5 people who in your space and make some kind of event that you promote together. That'd be my first tip.
Great tip. I completely agree. So great, Daniel. So before we go, and hopefully we've inspired some in the audience to start, planning a summit or their online course. can you give us a bit of a sneak peek of what's coming? Is there something you're working on that you'd like us to know about?
Well, the thing that I'm thinking about doing, and this is I've never mentioned this before to anybody,
Oh,
so this
nice.
is new for your summit, Brian. Is I'm thinking for 2024 of trying something very different and creating an event or a summit and maybe a newsletter to get things started for people who'd like to be online writing teachers. Uh,
Nice.
I all my materials so far have been for fiction writers, people who want to improve their craft. But doing these summits, seeing so many people give great talks and seeing some people like come up to me and ask if they could speak, it strikes me that it'd be really interesting to try to create some maybe a newsletter. If I've managed to get the newsletter up and running by the time this airs, then maybe you can have the link in my bio, um, and sort of trying to lay the groundwork for a summit for people who would like to become online writing teachers, improve their craft, and maybe make more money through that. That's kind of the thing that's I'm seeing if I have the time and energy to get that to work in 2024.
Nice. We're definitely interested in that, and great idea. And of course, yes, we'll have links to your site and all of your resources somewhere around here. And Daniel, thank you so much. It was absolutely great to have you as a returning guest, and I can't wait to be a guest myself in one of your summits and to see what you can achieve next year.
Thank you so much, Brian. Again, your advice has been so critical to me, and I'm very grateful. And everyone, I hope you're having a great time at this summit. And Brian, thank you for having me.
Thanks very much. And guys, don't forget, check all the links in some area around this video, and I'll see you in the next session.